Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. The Hungarian Grand Prix weekend is here and Red Bull have, as expected, brought some major updates to their side pods. They're being dubbed the Slim Pods by many. They're not dissimilar in some sense to the Zero Pods, but orientated in a rather different way. Red Bull have done to what Mercedes did last season and at the start of this season as well. Seems their development direction is very clear. A massive undercut on the side pods. We'll talk about the potential benefits that might have. Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Here's Danny Rick back in the paddock for the first time in a long time, at least in actual race suits and getting ready to go. Look how happy he looks right here. Walk into his grid spot for this weekend's Grand Prix. Going to be exciting to see him back in the car, even if the car isn't very good. Max Verstappen as well. If you're Sergio Perez, you're like, oh my god, here we go, because this isn't going to stop. Max was asked the question, would you like to have Daniel back as your teammate? And he said, actually, I never wanted him to leave in the first place. Kind of implying that if Max had a choice, he'd get Danny Rick back in the team right now, which is, yeah, it's going to be a long season for Checo Perez, and if his form doesn't improve, especially because this weekend, if it's dry in qualifying, Perez will be on the hard tyres in Q1, as will everybody be, but that's the qualifying format they're trialling this weekend. If you guys don't know, Q1's going to be hard tyres only, Q2 mediums, Q3 softs. If it's dry, if it rains, that of course goes out the window, but we know that Perez and the Red Bull struggle a little bit with tyre warm-up, and that's generally where he's had his issues in quali so far this season, so maybe there's a chance that Ricciardo out-qualifies him. That would be really interesting. I mean, look, he has failed to make Q3 in the last 5 races in a row. You'd think eventually that's going to end. Ricciardo was also asked about Nick de Vries, and does he feel bad that he's been replaced, and Daniel Ricciardo's like, yeah, I'd like to have him back on the grid, but he knows, I know, that's how Formula 1 works. When that quote was put to Hamilton, Hamilton said, well, I'd say that's just how Red Bull works, which is probably fair enough. Bit of shade Hamilton's way getting sent to Red Bull. I guess De Vries was a Mercedes driver last season in their kind of reserve position before he went to the Red Bull program, and it's how Red Bull work. Whether it's for good or for ill, it's how they operate. They're ruthless, they're cutthroat, and we know how it is at this point. And if you go to Red Bull's academy or whatever, you know what you're getting yourself in for. Speaking of the cost cap drama for the last few days, the FIA has actually responded to these rumours that said that the cost cap's being breached in all these ways. 2 or 3 teams are over the cap, and they've said, no, absolutely not. There is nothing of truth behind this at all. Let's not forget, they said the same thing last year, and then there were teams that actually breached it, as we full well know. So it's kind of like a joke that goes around in Formula 1 that's like, don't believe any rumours until the people that the rumours are about have officially denied it. Once people deny it, then they're true. That's kind of the joke, and maybe that'll continue here. We'll see, but it's going to be a good few weeks until we really get any information on this. There was also some rumours today from Amos talking about the 2026 regulations having, 30 kgs of fuel only to generate the electric power, the wheelbase to be shortened by 30 centimeters. This is quite a big one. It's not substantial, but the cars have got particularly long and particularly wide. 30 centimeter reduction in wheelbase is basically just shortening the car by 30 or so centimeters, which would be, I think most people would say, a good direction. 6 gears instead of 8, though, would be really interesting. These are very early leaks, but Auto, Motor and Sport are generally pretty accurate, so it's a long way away, but I just wanted to bring that to you guys as well. Let's talk upgrades then and changes for this weekend, because some teams are bringing things that are more circuit specific. That might be what Ferrari are doing. Either they're massively worried about cooling, which is unlikely to be the case given they've been generally fine so far, as have most other cars, or they're trying to do everything they can to maximize downforce. So these little flaps here for cooling on the side of the car have been opened to the maximum, which will increase drag. So either they are doing this out of necessity for cooling reasons, or they think it's actually going to give them some benefit in the corners. I guess we'll see about that. But yeah, obviously teams are looking to maximize downforce as a circuit like Hungary. Last year there was more overtaking on the straights than there usually is, largely thanks to the new regs. This year the cars are a bit harder to follow, might be a different story, but it's a maximum downforce circuit, and Lewis Hamilton's been talking about all the upgrades that teams are bringing to make that happen. He actually mentioned specifically on the cost cap, because lots of drum about that over the last few days, that it's a concern that some teams might be tempted to break it if the punishments are not severe enough. He's been throwing a few jabs Red Bull's way, to be honest, and there was also this one where he says that Red Bull tend to bring upgrades all the time. I've heard Red Bull bring in another update package this weekend. We'll see how that affects things. They seem to bring upgrades to their cars all the time, which is technically not true when you look at the season. Overall, the amount of upgrades they've brought are not too dissimilar to what some of the other top teams have done, but the implication is there from Hamilton, like, look, FIA, watch out here with these Red Bull fellas, because they seem to be doing an awful lot. They breached the cost cap last year, and with all the rumours going around, make sure they're not doing it again, is the very obvious implication here from Hamilton of what he's getting at. But let's talk the actual upgrades themselves. This was described as stunning upgrades the other day. Whether that's meant to be visually beautiful, as actually Verstappen reckons they look really good, and they look very different. We don't see any team on the grid going this aggressive with the undercut, and Red Bull believe, I mean, their car is already rapid, and maybe that's the floor, maybe that's the suspension, but they think they can do even better, and this is the direction they're going for. Now, of course, by reducing the inlets for the side pods, your cooling has to be very efficient, and this was the concern that Mercedes had. And let's not forget, last year Mercedes, races like Australia, we're talking 2022, the W13, races like Australia, races like Spain, they did have some cooling issues with their very slim zero pod design, which was almost identical in some respects to this Red Bull concept, but simply mounted on a different orientation. Mercedes did it vertically with the zero pod, which is very slim to the side of the car. The Red Bull has done so horizontally, and it looks a little bit similar to the Ferrari inlet of last year in some sense. But this is what it looks like. These were the first images that came out of the day without the kind of engine cover on, and you can just see how aggressive the undercut is now. It's changed quite a bit, right? So version 1 looked like this, quite a conventional wide side pod inlet. Version 2 that they brought a little while ago has now got even smaller, and now it's probably, what, halved in size again. So they believe they can get away with potentially slightly less cooling, and okay, it's a little bit wider now, so probably it should be okay, but the real design change is in the undercut of the side pod. You guys can see, just as a comparison here, the previous race compared to Hungary doesn't look quite so substantial on this image, but they're all from Albert Fabrega, and this is another example here of the newer version on top, which just shows that the undercut has got even more aggressive. You guys can see barely the bottom of the E in Oracle any longer, and that's because the undercut, so what the undercut is the air comes in the front, and it will funnel through this channel down around the side of the car. One of the key benefits of this is funneling the air in such a way as that it will seal off the floor. The floor generates most downforce when the ground effect from the Venturi tunnels is effectively sealed off. Back in the day when ground effect first came in the 70s, they used to actually put skirts on the side of the car to stop the air getting out. Over time, they, got a bit ridiculous. They stopped doing it, and for these new ground effect areas, you can't do that. But you can seal the air in with other air if you direct said air in the correct way, and obviously Adrian Newey knows a thing or two about how to do exactly that. So this is the new version, and they're going even more aggressive on the undercut. We've seen other teams like Aston Martin, even Ferrari, and to an extent Mercedes experiment with this idea, but Red Bull have gone all the way. Like, this is pretty much as far as you can go, as deep of an undercut as they can seemingly manage, and they reckon it's giving them even more performance than they already have. It's not just the side pod changes as well, it's also some front wing changes. This is their new front wing for Hungary, with a few changes here, probably predominantly for a higher downforce spec. But yeah, they said they're going to gain 0.2 of a second, or at least those were the rumours, and they've got a new front wing, they've got brand new side pods with seemingly even better performance in lower speed corners. That's what Verstappen expects. He says, yeah, should make us faster in the corners, it looks nice as well, and from his information from the simulator, that's the case. The car's going to be even faster, especially in those slower speed corners where Hungary is predominantly pretty famous for, to be honest. So it's kind of incredible that Red Bull are doing all this. They're also making other tweaks to their car. So we can see here the shark fin at the back. I don't imagine this is, I mean, they're experimenting with everything at this point, because they might as well just change it, because why not? I mean, you're going to win every race anyway, it seems, at this point. They've actually gone back from this shark fin version, as people are calling it, from the RB19, the previous version, and the late RB18, to what they were doing on the early RB18. So clearly they reckon that's going to give them more performance as well, and they got that right the first time, but again, a very minor thing at this point. So yeah, very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Some people will say, how can Red Bull afford all of this? How can they have enough time to develop all of this? And those are potentially valid questions. But if Max Verstappen, Adrian Newey and all those guys are right, this will make them even faster this weekend, especially on a weekend where not that many other teams are bringing that much more. I think McLaren might have something small. Mercedes, I've seen, have brought back their older rear wing spec that they used in Monaco. So just they have a specific high downforce rear wing that they use. They used it in Monaco, wasn't great there, but the car was only early days with those new updates worked on it, and since then they haven't really used that rear wing. So Mercedes have not exactly an upgrade, but a circuit-specific change. I think McLaren might have one thing a little bit more, but it's really Red Bull that are team pushing ahead this weekend, which is pretty scary given the way they've been performing as of late. And even George Russell goes one step further on this cost cap drama and goes on to say there were breaches last year of the cap. Clearly, the punishment didn't fit the crime. So people will say, oh, this George, he never shuts up, right? Which maybe is true, but is he wrong necessarily? Maybe not. So we'll see what happens this year. I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of drama and rumours and speculation over the coming weeks. This one, I'll do my best to keep you guys updated. And just to close out with, if you are a fan of Alpine, you might be happy with this news that Lauren Rossi, who has been known to be interfering a lot with the Alpine product, didn't he call them like amateurs or all this like a little while ago? Someone wasn't happy with him, and he's been replaced. Philip Creef, I'm not exactly sure, is coming in to replace him as CEO of Alpine, so maybe Otmar will be rather happy about this, because he hasn't been like on Rossi's good side, let's say, recently. So that might be a good sign for Alpine in the future, but it might not change all that much in the short to medium term. So very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.